Welcome to the Drive Able podcast. I'm Ali Akbari and over there is Brad Williams. Today we are talking about disability and aging with a disability, spina bifida, car transfers, basically progressing your life with hand controls and evolving them through NDIS with Katie Gallagher. Katie has spina bifida. She's been driving with hand controls since she was 18 for 40 plus years. But in this episode, we're going to be talking to her about a transition that she's going. So she's moving from the old school through to the new school, moving towards NDIS funding, new electronic controls, and she's right in the middle of that. And she's doing assessments and all of that. And so it's actually something different. And I'm actually really excited because it's kind of like we're getting to go right into the middle of like the engine bay and have a look at what's going on underneath, right in the middle of it. So Brad, are you ready to get this one going?
Yeah, mate. We normally talk to people after the event, once they're on the road and they're driving, and it's a few months or a few years after the process. This one, right in the middle of the process. So, yeah, this will be a bit of a different perspective. So, yeah, let's get it underway.
Welcome to the Drive Able podcast, where each episode you get to listen to two of Australia's leading professionals in the area of driving and community mobility for people with disabilities. In each episode, they interview drivers, carers, and industry experts and share the insider's guide to driving with a disability. Here are your hosts, Brad and Ollie.
Hi everyone, I'm really excited to get into today's interview, but before we get started, we just want to do a quick shout out to our sponsors who make this show possible, Mobility Engineering and Williams OT. This show takes a lot of time and money to put together, so we just want to say a massive thanks to our sponsors for helping us bring this podcast to you today. And today, we're talking with Katie Gallagher. Katie, thanks very much for joining us. How are you today?
Oh, terrific, thanks.
Excellent. We always start with the same question. Can you introduce yourself by telling us a little bit about your background, but also let us have a bit of insight about what your disability is?
Sure. So my disability is spina bifida. So I'm wheelchair bound in a manual wheelchair. Other than that, I am a wife and mother. And I work for myself in an email marketing business. And I'm also an athlete. I play para badminton. And I'm also involved with singing. I'm an assistant leader to a Sing Australia Glenelg. And also a local coordinator a volunteer local coordinator for a couple of international hosting businesses for Adelaide. So I look after students that come in on short-term hosts and international students, and look after the families that are here that are with them. So I'm pretty busy.
Yeah, very active, very active. I don't know how you keep your head around all of that. Yeah, you're out
very supportive.
All the
very
time.
Supportive husband.
Shout out to the partners and parents that they come to the top of the conversation all the time in this podcast. Yeah. And we always like to recognize parents, partners, and the support staff and so forth as well, of everybody that comes on this podcast. But what this podcast is all about is about driving. Do you want to give us a little bit about your history in regards to driving? When did you get your license? When did you start driving? When did you start? Yeah, can you give us a bit of a background on that?
Yeah, sure. So I started driving about 40 years ago, and in my late teens, and I was driving very successfully for many, many years. I did manage to total a car once, and as one does in the early years of driving, you do have those little incidents. But I've been enjoyed driving. I loved driving up until probably about 2 or 3 years ago. when things started getting more challenging.
Okay. When you first got your license, talk to us about that process, and did you have any controls, or what does, for the people that don't know, how does spina bifida impact on driving?
Okay, so my spina bifida, with my spina bifida, I have no lower body control. So all my driving is done with hand controls. So that's
Has
how
that
I
been
learned
the
to
case
drive.
the whole time?
Sorry, what's that, Ali?
Has that been the case the whole time?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So for the 40 years?
Absolutely. Yeah.
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 Okay.
Yeah. I've always had hand controls.
And
And
where are you from? Sorry, which are you from? Adelaide?
yes, I am.
Okay. No worries.
So there's a it's well known around the industry that Adelaide had their own unique hand controls, or more prominent hand controls, and I think that's maybe where Ali is going with that.
Oh,
The
no, I was
first
just more also interested to know, I guess, how mobile you needed to be, if that makes sense, and the way you were, if you're in like a regional area or not. So
Yeah.
and also, yeah, I guess what kind of hand controls you would have had. I'm guessing, I guess being in Adelaide would have been like the motorbike style one, or some form of homemade one, being 40 years ago.
It was definitely the motorbike style.
Yeah.
Which, yes, it's did impact on my wrists as well, as I got older. So it was the motorbike style with the twist knob on the steering wheel.
Yep.
So
Spin a knob on the steering wheel, and then it's a motorbike throttle which cables to the back of your accelerator and pulls your accelerator down. Very mechanical.
And
absolutely.
you used, for how long did you use that sort of setup, and how long was it working for you?
Always.
Yeah.
I've
Okay.
always used it until I had the opportunity to try a vehicle recently with Williams OT, which had introduced me to a completely different style, which I actually really loved. I was a bit worried about trying it because it was so completely different, but I could certainly see the benefits, and I wish I'd seen it earlier.
Well, I guess we've actually spoken about on this podcast about how there's quite a big change, and that's sort of what I was wanting to build up to as well. Is that 40 years ago, it was very basic, and there was kind of a handful of stuff, and it was only even unique to the city that you were in. Like, for example, I never even heard. I was in the disability industry. I never even heard of those hand controls from Adelaide until a couple of years ago. And I'm an automotive engineer. Never even seen them. Heard of them. But now, as we've spoken, due to NDIS and people like Total Ability and Mobility Engineering and others kind of pushing different products, there's so much more available and so much more choice and an option, and I guess you can be a lot more flexible based on your needs and wants, I guess. So that's that's really cool. And do you know what kind of a hand control it is?
No, I tried with Williams OT.
Yeah.
No, the brand, the type.
No, I can't remember. It was a flick. It was a flick. With the finger.
Trigger. Yeah, a trigger.
Oh, yeah,
So
okay.
that's
the
the Total
hand
Ability.
controls.
The Total Ability FADL. I think it's called the FSK 2005 for anyone that's listening. You can go and look that up, and we can put a link to that in the show notes, in the description sections of this podcast, wherever you get it from. We'll put a link to the Total Ability website where they've got that hand control. It's actually a very similar. I know you were scared, Katie, but the actual process of actually accelerating is very similar. Did you find that it is something that you could get your head around pretty quick?
I adapted really well, actually. I surprised myself.
Yeah.
We sort of did a few laps around the local, like inner suburb area, which was not, too scary. And while I got adapted to it, and then it was suggested that we might go onto one of the major roads, and I'm like, no, bad, and then you'll be fine, and I actually was, and I was overtaking and had no problems at all, and I was very comfortable. So it's certainly a control that I'm looking for in my next vehicle.
One thing actually I'll mention to that, something that I've experienced with driving, and I've worked with a few disability or disabled drivers and some advocates around this factor. So, and I guess to really shout out and give some confidence to the disabled community of drivers is that what you've just described is vehicle operation, if that makes sense. So when we learn how to drive a vehicle, we also learn within our minds how to operate the vehicle. And that actually doesn't matter what hand control or what control we use, because operating a vehicle requires a certain, feedback type of process of, okay, this amount of acceleration, I need to brake now, and so on. So often people get sort of fearful of trying a new hand control and not being able to try something different, because they think, oh, I'm not going to be able to use it, but they still know how to operate a vehicle. They still know how the vehicle works. It's just a small little tweaking of a few different functions to get that going. So, and like you've just said, so many people, I hear this feedback. I went in there and I was like, oh, this is way easier than what I thought, Well, it's because you know how to drive, it's just slightly different controls.
Yeah. I explain it when you're going from one type of hand control to another type of hand control. It's like going from an Apple to a Samsung phone. Yeah, they've got different operating procedures, but you still know how to do it, so you can navigate your way through it and figure it out. But learning hand controls for the first time is like going from a brick phone with no internet to a smartphone. That's the way that I like to think about it. It's, you've got so many more options, and you've got to get your head around it. But once you get your head around it, it's no worries. So, but you're doing more than just hand controls, Katie, aren't you, at the moment? You're investigating new processes around driving, getting in and out, and so forth as well. Can we explore that a little bit?
This is what has impeded me over the last 3 years, is the actual transferring in and out of my car, which is actually stopped me wanting to drive, because it's becoming so much more difficult to transfer. If it was only for the transfer, if it was only for the driving, I'd still be driving. I still love to drive. But I have developed over the last few years what's called lymphedema, which is a swelling of the lymph nodes in the extremities. And so what that results in is that my legs are swelling up, and that is now creating extra weight in my body, in my lower body. And so that is impeding me in transferring in and out of my chair to anything, be it a shower chair, be it a bed or a car. And so that is really causing me a lot of grief. And so that's why
previously it was a bit of a slide transfer from wheelchair to car seat.
Yeah, that's how I transfer. Yeah.
Okay.
Everything has always been the same until 3 years ago, basically, from when you started. Yep. So on that, can I ask a little bit about, I guess, the funding and so on? So I'm guessing, your original setup wasn't funded. There was nothing like that back in the day, and NDIS has now been around for 10 plus years. Have you, in that last 10 years, been, now I'm guessing you've been involved in it in some way, getting all these new products, but previous to that, did you think, were you involved in it? Did you look at that, or did you just have your old sort of system and that was going fine?
Yeah, until things sort of started falling apart 3 years ago, I was just going along my merry way, not really thinking anything of it.
Yeah. Okay.
Didn't think, it ain't broke, don't fix it,
Yeah,
so it was
yeah.
working for me.
No, I thought that might be the case, but also just a little bit of a highlight, I guess, because there is, especially now with media, a little bit of a bad rap sometimes with, people just get onto NDIS just because they can, and, try and get free products and so on. And your story is much more common of what I actually hear on the ground, more more often than not, people are actually holding on to a lot of their older setups for as long as they can. And even though it's all this sort of, free funding and so on is available, they're actually not necessarily accessing it. So,
Katie,
yeah.
how old was your car? How old were your hand controls in your car before you started exploring?
Oh, well, the car that we had actually wasn't that old, simply because we'd changed cars couple of years beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
Because our previous car was broken down and needed replacing. But previous to that, probably I don't know, about 10 years old, maybe. I can't remember, to be honest. But it wasn't, it wasn't that young. We'd held on to it for a long time.
As the engineer,
And it was
just out
all
of interest, just as the engineer out of interest, did you keep using the same one and pull it out and put it into the new vehicle, the hand control?
No.
Or did you keep buying new ones?
I kept buying new ones.
Yeah, okay, no worries.
Yeah.
So how has NDIS been involved in this process, Katie? When did you start exploring? Because you said there's 3 years where you struggled or you didn't enjoy driving because it was difficult for you. How did you come to the process and the decision to actually do something about it, start a process of trying to figure out if there's any answers? And how was NDIS involved in funding or helping you through that?
Okay, well, I was actually at an expo just recently, and I was actually there for my singing group. We were doing some singing, and it was an expo for disability and aging, and I took the opportunity to investigate the vehicles that I saw there. And that's when I came across Williams OT and started talking to different people and you and others about the opportunities that that might be available. And that started the whole process. Then I had the meeting with Heather, who was absolutely fantastic. She was so, because I was quite nervous about the whole process, because I was thinking, probably waiting 3 years was more about my lack of I was going to say not lack of knowledge, but fear of the process, of what was going to happen and what answers would actually be there or not be there for me. And but she was fantastic, made me feel really comfortable, and then we started exploring the options. And then I got a chance to try out the vehicle that we were talking about previously, which was brilliant. It's a fantastic experience. And then Heather put together a report to put to NDIS. And that's basically where we're at the moment. She's done the report, it's been submitted, and now we wait.
Yeah, okay.
Now you wait. But what did you go through in regards to exploring the transfers? So let's get back to that area. The transfers are getting difficult because of the edema, the lymphedema in your lower limbs, making that slide transfer difficult, heavy, hard to maneuver from one service to another. So what process did you go through? What exploration did you go through to try and overcome that? I mean, if you're watching this on YouTube, behind Ali's head is a turnout seat. As an example, with those, what exploration did you go through, Katie? What's available and what type of things did you tick off, go through in this process?
Yeah, well, with Heather, we really talked about, what my needs were and what I needed, I wanted out of a vehicle. And we realized that the turnout seat that we were talking about probably wouldn't work for me, because my legs would be too wide and wouldn't tuck in to be able to use that sort of option. We then looked at, because I wanted a vehicle that both my husband and I could drive. That was really important to both of us. And so we looked at the option of whether we could have a turnout chair inside the vehicle that I could roll up into the vehicle and transfer into the vehicle, and then turn the chair around to drive. And then that way Peter could drive as well.
So just for the people listening to this, if we're trying to figure out what that means, have a look at a 6-way base. So a chair that's the driving seat, it comes back to the middle row of a van and then twists around inside the van. So keep going, Katie. Sorry, I just wanted to do a bit of a technical explanation of what that actually is.
That's fine. But then after discussions, we realized that actually that doesn't solve our problem, because that still does involve a transfer, and that still would be problematic. So we discounted that one as an option. And then we looked into the possibility. I said, I put my creative head on and said, look, is there an option where I could actually get a driving situation where I could stay in my chair and drive, and then when I'm not driving, the chair in the passenger seat slides across, and then Peter can drive and I can be the passenger. And we weren't too sure about that, but Heather did lots of investigating and came across one option that wasn't quite the same as what I was looking at, but what the solution was found was a vehicle where the driver's seat can be pulled back and out and shifted across and put into the passenger seat option. When we were talking about my creative idea of sliding it across, she said that in her experience, NDIS would not actually be willing to investigate something that hasn't been created yet. They were not willing to put the finances behind something that requires extensive R&D. Whereas if something that they're more likely to accept something that is already on the market, and able to be used. So I was like, okay, fair enough. Yeah. And that's when she came up with this other solution. And that's the vehicle, the setup that we tried, that I test drove. Sorry.
Right. Yeah. Just to go back on something that you said, and we might explore this afterwards in our top 3 takeaways that we do at the end. It doesn't mean that NDIS won't fund, but they need to make sure that all options are explored. And if there is an option that is already, well, it's going to be a lot cheaper if it's already designed and researched and meets ADRs and all those type of things. If somebody's already gone through that process to make sure it all happens, then it's going to be a lot cheaper. So NDIS want to make sure that all of those things have been explored, and if it does meet your needs, then that's the one that is more likely going to be funded. So when you did your trial for the wheelchair access, talk us through that process, and what kind of car was the trial done in? And are you purchasing the same car? Lots of questions there. Let's break it down. What did you do your trial in?
Okay, so I did a trial in a van, and I can't actually remember the brand.
I'm pretty sure from memory seeing, I know you, Katie, and I was in the area at the time. I'm pretty sure it was the Total Ability van while it was here visiting. And it was the Volkswagen, well, that one's a transporter or a multi-van. So pretty sure that's the one that you trialed, getting into the driving position in a wheelchair in, from memory. Is that the setup that you're going to go with, or are you going to explore something a bit different?
I'm not too sure. I'm looking at the there are a couple of options that Heather mentioned. There's one called the Staria that she mentioned might be an option. Yep. And I'm up in the air as to whether I would like, because this was a rear entry vehicle, And I'm sort of up in the air as to whether I would prefer a side entry vehicle or a rear entry vehicle.
Mhm.
The pros and cons are both options. So the with the trial of this one, I did have to actually transfer into another chair because it did require an anchor point in the chair, which obviously would come with any other setup, but my chair didn't have that anchor point in it, so I had to transfer into a chair that was already part of the vehicle, which was a motorized chair that went up. Then I went up into the vehicle and
You don't use a power wheelchair?
no,
No.
no,
So it's about
I don't see the need yet.
yeah. So it's about driving from a manual wheelchair.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so you're exploring which vans are going to be appropriate for you finance wise and getting in and out and so forth. You've done. Do you know how long the process has been with the OT?
Yeah, that's a good question. I haven't even thought about that.
It's just well, I'll let you think about it because it's an interesting topic at the moment with the time we're recording this. There's been announcements about overhauling the NDIS and about people rorting the system and overcharging and so on and so forth. But this is an exhaustive process to try and get the right products, the right systems, the right setups, because you're going to have this car hopefully for a long time, eight plus
absolutely.
years.
Yeah.
The process is long and exhaustive. And there's a lot of report writing.
When did you go to the expo? When was the expo that you first went to? Do you remember?
Oh gosh, I can't even remember that. I was going to say that Heather wrote the report about 6 weeks ago.
Yep.
So that's when the report was submitted. And I can't remember. It was
Was it last year? Was it last year or the year before?
No. It's more recent than that. When was the
I reckon it would have been October last year. So that's when the last DAL Expo on, the Disability and Age and Lifestyle Disability one was in Adelaide. So yeah, look, Ali and I are huge about expos. They really give you the opportunity to explore. And if you've been listening to this podcast for a while now, Ali's and I we've gone over and done Sydney and Melbourne expos and Adelaide expos and done a bit of a walkthrough for some of the tours. And Ali's even been over to Rear Care in Germany and done a walkthrough of some of the one of the shows over there. It really is a great way to explore, and Katie's backed that up as well today.
Yeah, I also was interesting. I want to note that you're around about 7 months in by the sounds of it. And again, I'm interested in this question. I was interested as to when you started, I guess, the very first day of, I need to look at something because it looks like it's tracking to a correct time frame as to what we're seeing on average, which is I guess it's just to normalize this for the community out there as well, because there seems to be sometimes a bit of stress around how long it takes and expectations. And what seems to be pretty consistent is you're coming up to 7 months, and now if you get it before 12 months, you've done really well. But generally we're talking about 12 to 18 months is what we're seeing the average is for people to get something over the line, because it is such an extensive process. And then the more complex ones, as we've said before, it can take up to 2.5 to 3 years. So yeah, I just wanted to note that as well, that given that you started this process in October, very, very first sort of looking at a product, and then 7 months later you're here. I think it's good to highlight that, and I guess you've gone down, by the looks of it, the correct pathways, if that makes sense. Done the right things.
And just to highlight, that's just the assessment process.
Yeah.
Now we've got the NDIS process and the modification process. So it's taken 6 months. If the report was written about 6 weeks ago, it's taken 6 months from starting the exploration period through to getting the report done. And that's really important for people to understand. I don't know if that's consistent in other states, but that's certainly some of the things that we have to do in South Australia. The van only visits every so often, so having access to the total ability van can be a little bit restrictive in South Australia, in Melbourne and Sydney, and I think Brisbane as well. It's available a little bit more often. And I know Tasmania, we share the van with Tasmania, so they're on the same bracket as us. We're just to let you know, we're hopeful of talking to Total Ability about this van in a future podcast. So make sure you listen out for that in the future. But yeah, it's a long process. But we really hope that it's worth it, Katie.
Yeah, well, and I have been told that it could be another 12 months before, this could all be, embedded and finished. So
have you heard from the NDIS yet after the reports have been
no.
submitted?
No,
Yeah.
I haven't heard anything since.
Yeah.
So I have no idea what's going on at this stage. But yeah, I have heard that it's, I could be looking at another 12 months at least before I'm driving again.
Is there any advice that you'd give to anyone else that wants to follow in your footsteps?
Don't wait 3 years.
Don't wait 3 years. Yeah. Don't be afraid.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid of it.
Yeah. Take the bull by the horns. Don't be, stubborn like I was and fearful, because I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what to do. I just knew that, it wasn't working for me. And I just didn't know where to go, what direction to go in. I didn't know who could help. And I think that has been a downfall of NDIS in the fact that it has taken away, it has given us the independence to choose people that we want and services that we want, but it's taken away the advisory component of the system, because we don't know who to go to now to get advice.
Yeah,
and very, very interesting and insightful. That's an intriguing aspect. What was it like before NDIS? So explain to me where you got your advice from before.
Well, there were disability services that were there. If I had like getting a chair, for example, a new wheelchair, I would always be approached by a service and say, okay, this is what we've got, and this is what we can offer you, and are you happy with that? And we're like, yeah, okay, that works. Whereas they started the process for us, and then we took the reins. Then the choices were limited, but also we had the support, and I think that's lacking. Then that's left a hole in the system, I believe, and maybe just me. I don't know if others feel the same way.
Yeah. And that would have been just to fill in some of the blanks there potentially. Was that through Disability SA at the time? Yeah. So Disability SA was a South Australian government funded program, which was an advisory and was a system in place before the NDIS, but they had government funding and were able to do advisory elements as well. It is much more individualized now, for sure. With the NDIS, you have to charge to an individual. So it is a lot more individual, and it is now in the hands of the client to seek the information that they need and go exploring for it, or the support coordinators to help people through that process. So yeah, that's really insightful, and I really thank you for sharing that. And that hasn't come up in one of our interviews yet. So that's a gold nugget there, which I'm sure we'll explore a little bit later.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think I want to work towards wrapping it up, but I want to mention something, I guess, to bring it back to where we started, because when we started, you mentioned you are a wife and mother and have, the email marketing business and wheelchair athlete and singer, and you're doing all of these things. And like you said, you've waited a while to, get the controls or upgrade that life. And I'm assuming that when you are going to be better set up, these activities are going to be a lot easier to accomplish once you're a bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm relying a lot more on my husband to help me with transport. I'm relying a lot more on access cabs than I ever used to before. And that is becoming, financially draining.
Yeah. That's good.
We do still have a financial support for access cabs here in South Australia, but they're keep hanging their axe over our heads saying that that's going to go. So once I can get a vehicle that I can use more comfortably, I won't have to rely on other people, and I won't have to rely on access cabs.
How do you go with
So
access
just
cabs?
a lot
What
of
are
you
access
do.
cabs like for you in regards to transport?
I'm actually really lucky. I have had I've actually got a nominated or a preferred driver who has been wonderful and has always been there for me. So I haven't had the horrific stories that I've heard of a lot of people waiting 2 or 3 hours for an access cab. Yeah. So
how did you get a preferred driver out of interest? Is it just building a relationship, or?
It was building a relationship with one of the drivers, yes. And he's not always available, but he's often available, and it's been great. So, but it's also about being having to rely on that and not being able to come and go as I please.
Independence.
Sorry?
Having that independence.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And I do miss that.
Yeah.
I do miss that.
All right. Well, before we wind up and ask our final questions, we've learnt over the podcast that driving is more than just getting from A to B. But before we ask you that final question, we just want to again quickly acknowledge the sponsors that make this show possible: Mobility Engineering and Williams OT. Like I was saying, that we have learnt and people have shared all kinds of stories about their adventures in cars. What's a meaningful trip or special thing that you've done in your car over the 40 years of driving? Where's somewhere that you've gone, or something that means something to you that you've done in a car, Katie?
Well, I used to drive a lot. I think where meaningful, can't think of anything that I suppose on one occasion I drove from Mount Gambier to Adelaide, after being with a rover crew back in the day, and I actually drove the entire trip on my own, and I really was very early in my driving career, and I just really enjoyed the independence, of going that sort of distance on my own.
Awesome.
How was the wrist after it?
Yeah.
How was the wrist after that drive?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. The wrist after all this driving has it's been taking its wear and tear. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Can't wait to get the electronic control in there for you, Katie, and take off some of that burden. It'll make a massive difference to your life. And fingers crossed, the funding's not too far away for funding approval for wheelchair access right through to the driver's seat area. Some of the other little components that will come with that is a turn-in headrest, a docking station at the bottom of your wheelchair, and those hand controls as well. So yeah, it'll make a massive difference to your life, and you'll wonder how you survived over the last 3 years. If anyone's got any further questions for you, is there a way that they can get in contact with you? Are you on socials at all? Are you on Facebook or Instagram or anything else like that at all, Katie?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook.
Yep.
And with and in my maiden name, Rauschel. So
Okay.
Katie Rauschel.
Well, we might share that with the listeners in the show notes or in the description at the bottom, if in case they wanted to reach out with you, if that's okay. But just yeah, there's lots of gold nuggets in this interview itself. So go back, make sure you listen to it again.
Yeah, that was really good. Very, very
good. A massive thank you to you. We really appreciate your time. It's a bit of a different interview. We know that you're in the middle of the process, and that's why we actually wanted to get you on, because it's a different aspect. It's not after the event, it's in the middle of the event, and we just wanted to explore what that was like and where you're up to with this process. So maybe we'll get you back on at the end and see if your life has changed for the better, and what that next stage of your process was like. How would you agree to that?
I'd be happy to be involved in that. That'd be lovely.
Yeah,
Katie, that would be awesome. Thanks very much. All right, stick around, everyone. You know what we do next. We come back with our top 3 takeaways from the interview. There's always gold nuggets in these interviews, and we just want to highlight our top 3 for those. But as we move off to that, we just say goodbye to Katie. Katie, thanks very much for your time today.
You're very welcome. Thanks for talking to me.
Thank you very much, Katie. That was really, really good. So yeah, thanks very much. Lots of great stuff there. All right, welcome back. In this section, we bring you our expert analysis and top 3 takeaways from the interview. This is where we provide our more than 30 years of joint experience in the industry, helping people with disabilities to drive and get out in the community in a safe and meaningful way. So, Brad, that was, again, a great interview with Katie, full of gold there. We were kind of like writing a lot of lessons and takeaways, but we had to get it down to the top 3. So here's number 1.
I got a note page full of bits and pieces. My head was down, jotting down things the whole time. So it was hard to narrow this down to 3. And I think also, just a little shout out to Katie, joining us halfway through the process is a little bit different to trying to look back at it retrospectively. It's in right in the middle. So this is a little bit of an interesting top 3 takeaway. But the first one that we want to talk to you about is that change from old hand controls to new hand controls, which was highlighted. And you know, I made mention it's like going from an Apple to a Samsung, but it might also be from a Samsung S something, I don't know, an iPhone 11 to an iPhone 14. It's can be exciting, can be something that can add value to your life, and really shouldn't be something to be afraid of. Don't put off life because you want to stick with something that you know. There's lots of things out there that can really enhance your life if you're willing to explore.
Yeah, and one area around that I guess I really wanted to highlight is that the operating and driving a car is very different to the controls that you use to do that. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I recently worked with the New South Wales government because there was some issues around, you know, effectively over assessing disability drivers who've been driving for, you know, 20, 30 years just to go get, you know, if they've moved the same hand control or even slightly different hand control to a new product to get their license, the new car, the entire assessment had to be started again, driving assessments and so on. And we were kind of debating, and we showed through so many drivers that it's not about the controls, it's about your ability to actually drive. Because when you drive within your body and your mind, you understand, I've got to indicate, I've got to accelerate, I've got to brake now. Those functions are sort of irrelevant to the controls. The controls is something that you train yourself to operate those functions with. So again, like Katie said, she was very worried about using some other control, thinking that she's not going to be able to drive. But she's a driver. She's been driving for 40 years, so she's always going to be able to drive. It's just what's the controls that I'm using, and that's the kind of challenge I put to people out there is get out there and try something new. Try something different, because there is so many products out there.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, and this is a side note. This is 1A. There's a real issue at the moment in South Australia as well. I mean, you've had the arguments with New South Wales RTA about the assessment process. We're going to have to go through the same process here in South Australia. Unfortunately, last year, somebody with a disability ran over a cyclist after being approved to drive, and the whole process of that assessment to drive was analysed. And now what's happened is there's been a massive backflip on what the quality of those assessments are. So now people with disabilities are being put through the ringer. It's not just, can you drive with these controls like anyone else in your age group? It is now, you have to be spot on in South Australia. So we had a gentleman not pass his test because he's been driving trucks for 30 years, more than 30 years, which means that he's got a massively long thing that he has to compensate for, and he drives trucks more often than a car. It means he's got a bit of a habit of turning a little bit wide on his left-hand turns to allow for the trailer. He got failed. He could drive perfectly well, but he was doing wide left-hand turns.
Yeah,
he can drive. He knows the road rules. He can stop at stop signs. He can stop at traffic lights. He can make decisions and things like that. But he's not getting through the assessment process because of wide left-hand turns. And it's not that there was any danger coming or got close to a car. It's just that there was this habitual thing of going on wide, and he was allowing room for that, but didn't get through the test. All kinds of things like that, and in regards to being really stringent on testing processes now. So it's an unfortunate thing that's happening at the moment.
Yeah. But like I said, don't let that get you down. Get out there and try different controls, because there's lots of different things.
Just be aware of it. Yeah, just be aware of it. But it kind of leads into the second takeaway that we've got, Ali, and that's the that hand controls can, or the actual art of driving the car, the steering wheel and the pedals, can actually be a different issue compared to getting in and out of the car. Sometimes the getting in and out of the car is the bigger hurdle than actually driving.
Yeah, and that's something which I thought that was interesting there. Katie was saying the driving wasn't necessarily the concern. It was the maneuverability and getting in and out. And there was a couple of other people I was thinking of that we've heard the same sort of thing. And that, I guess, again, going back to talking about all the different products and so on, there is so many ways to transfer in and out, turn out, turn in, transfer boards, all these kind of bits and pieces, and so it's, there is so many things that you can do to help and assist with the transfer. So then you can continue that driving journey, so it's
absolutely. The six-way base as well, just to let you know, that six-way base that she said that she explored about a turning seat inside the van versus a turning seat that comes out of the van. I know personally as well that we know it was explored, the transfer boards and so forth as well, but getting the wheelchair in and out of cars and all those type of things is also really difficult. So look, there's many things to explore, and in regards just to get in and out of a vehicle, but there's so many options out there as well.
And that really perfectly ties into that third takeaway, which is just go to an expo. Like we've covered it so many times, and I mean, at the time of recording, this may already be out by the time that happens, but there's ATSA expos coming up now, and there's some at the end of the year as well, the Dial Expo and so on. They're always on, but they are a great place for you to go and try different things and see different things. And when we were offline, I was saying to Brad, my experience working at an expo, every single day I've worked at an expo, it's been the same experience. At least 5 to 10 times I'll have someone come up and go, "Oh my God, wow, I've never seen
yeah.
anything like this.
Yeah.
Wow." Oh, there's so many great products here. I never knew I could do anything like this. It's literally 5 to 10 times a day, at an expo. So be one of those people. Go out there and wow yourself. It's the great place to, and that's where Katie got her idea of there's actually something better here for me, and I can do something about this.
She mentioned that in South Australia, at least anyway, in the days before NDIS, there was Disability SA, the advisory type councils that were out there. There's still some of those around, but it's very much like I mentioned, a very individualized funding process now with NDIS, and rather than a pool of money and you can educate lots of people, it's now very one-on-one. These expos kind of replace that.
Yeah,
it's where you get your advice, your information, your exploration, your trials, your things like that. You can go and explore and then narrow that down into an individual focus with your NDIS funding. So get out there. I mean, that's why we do this podcast, because there is a little bit of lack of advice out there these days. So please share this podcast with people that for some of the advice around driving, people's stories and experiences is why we do it. But also, we every time we're at an expo, we do a walk around to show you what's out there, to get you excited, to get you off to one of those expos. So do it. Just get there. Yeah. Just make it happen. In South Australia, we've got the DAL Expo coming up at the end of the year, DAHL, and there's the ATSA. ATSA's coming to Adelaide next year, which is the first time it's coming as well. So, but in Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane and Perth, they're all coming out later on this year.
And they often have educational sessions in a lot of these expos as well, and that's also very beneficial for members of the public to go and visit them. Sometimes they're a bit intimidated because, it's got OTs and so on, but that's actually where you get a lot of gold, because you've got someone explaining the technical background and the functions, and maybe a little bit less salesy. So again, you can get really good information and answer those technical questions within those forums of those expos. It's not just a sales thing. It's actually more a functional educational thing as well. So yeah.
The insider goss. Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. All right. Here we go. So that's it. That's our top 3 takeaways.
Yeah.
That's an interview with Katie, who's in the middle of a process, in the middle of the application process, and I'm really excited to get her back on at the end of all of this. What about you?
Yeah, me too. And it'd be really, really good to see how she goes, maybe in a year's time, to see how the transport is going and how all of those activities are going within her life, probably a lot more efficiently. So yeah, and I guess we'll wind it up here. And as we wind up this episode, we want to give a shout out to our sponsors, Mobility Engineering and Williams OT, for helping us bring you the interview with Katie today. Williams OT Driver Assessment and Rehab offers all the pieces of the puzzle to assist people with disabilities reach their driving and community mobility goals. And Mobility Engineering is a team of passionate, dedicated people focused on bringing Australia's largest range of suitable transport solutions for all walks of life. And as we say in every episode, anything perceived or the advice provided in this podcast is general in nature. So if you have any queries about what you can do and what will work for you, you get in contact with your local OT or mobility dealer, or go to an expo and set yourself up with a trial, because trials really do put you in that driver's seat.
Yeah, that's it. Make sure you like and share this podcast wherever you're listening to it. Share it around with people that that might take some interest in this conversation. If they're struggling with their driving, struggling with their transfers, make sure you share it. And if you want to be a sponsor of this show, make sure you reach out to us through our social channels and get in contact. We really would like to have a little bit more support behind this podcast to get it out to more people. So make sure you get in contact with us.
Yeah.
That's it. See you in the next one.
See you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Drive Able podcast with Brad Williams and Ali Akbarian. If you like what you've heard, make sure you like, rate and subscribe. It really does make a massive difference. If you or anyone you know would like to share a story about driving with a disability, or you would like to get in contact, find the show notes, or find the resources mentioned in this episode, you can find us on Facebook. Just search @Drive Able Podcast for more information.